Every birthday, I would wish on my birthday cake that I would have my own TV show.
I'm Jeannie Becker. I'm Jeannie Becker. Jeannie Becker, fashion television.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Jeannie Becker is a legend, absolute legend, not just here, but all around the world.
Your memoir, thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really a wonderful read, but you've structured it in a very interesting way. It's not sort of a standard chronological order, here we go. You've structured it around pieces of wardrobe, which of course makes great sense for you.
This amazing suede and leather jewel-encrusted dress was gifted to me by the House of Dior.
Why'd you do that? How'd you come up with that?
It worked as a wonderful template, of course, because I started just thinking about the pieces of clothing or accessories or pieces of jewelry throughout my life that had significant meaning, many of them which I held on to, got very sentimentally attached to. And I thought, if I use these pieces as springboards for the storytelling, it'll help me edit my life, because I've got so many stories. I mean, I could write 5,000 books, but this really kept me in line. And if I didn't have a particular garment or a piece of jewelry or an accessory to go with the story, well, the story wouldn't be told. We'll save that for another book. And this dress is so meaningful to me because this was given to me by the late, great Karl Lagerfeld this past decade. And I think every decade or so really demands that kind of reflection. Was very profound to me, the things that happened to me. I lost my mom. I met the love of my life. I went through a cancer journey. My show of 27 years got canceled just like that. So a lot of stuff happened. I thought, time to reflect and write a book. This is my 6th book, but the easiest one that I've ever written. It was just an absolute joy to write it from beginning to end.
Your father's factory. What did he make?
Slippers.
Do you think by spending time at that plant, it planted a seed with you about fashion?
Well, I think my mother certainly planted those fashion seeds in me at a very, very early age. I didn't really see my dad's business as one that was fashion related. He was making these novelty slippers that weren't really on trend. They were just whimsical, fun, kooky little slippers for little kids that were, plush little bunny heads and tiger heads and clown heads. They had googly eyes, they had squeakers in the heads. They were more like toys than they were fashion. But in later years, I realized how much my father's business really did teach me about the business of fashion, and that you had to keep coming up with novel ideas, that you had these collections that you would have to sell, every season, that you always had to worry about undercutting the competition. So without question, that factory, that shop, as he called it, taught me a lot about the business of fashion.
But your eye for style came from your mom.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where would she have acquired that taste?
She was an Eastern European woman, and I just think she had a great eye for style and a great passion for style. And of course, as a Holocaust survivor who went through the Holocaust at an age when most young women are really, thinking about the way they want to present themselves to the world, and they're really playing with dress up. My mom could never do that at all. The war broke out when she was 19 years old. She just had a penchant for fashion and then my dad too, always used to say, this is the first thing that people will judge you on, the way you're dressed. So you have to really be careful about the way you're dressed. It's all, it was like, oh, okay. And he would, because he worked in the garment industry in Toronto, he would take me to various showrooms, because we would never play retail for anything. I mean, that was like, oh, no, you didn't do that. So he would get all these, all these invitations to showrooms from, various garment manufacturers. And because I wore a sample size as a teenager, I got to get some pretty neat stuff. But my mom also was a great craftswoman. And in 1959, when we moved to the suburbs, my dad bought her a sewing machine. And we just had a field day. She always had subscriptions to Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. And my sister and my mom and I would sit there and pore over the pages and dream about all these fantastic designer frocks that, of course, we could never afford to buy, but my mom might be able to replicate them somehow. And we would go to this wonderful fabric emporium in downtown Toronto called Stitsky's. It was like the Mirvish Street Village, right around Bloor and Bathurst. And we would spend days there looking at all these great fabrics and buying patterns, and my mom would whip up fantastic garments for us. This gown was made for my mom by her German dressmaker, Mrs. Olsen, and it was one of her prized wardrobe possessions, and when she couldn't wear it anymore, she gave it to me, hoping that my daughters would perhaps resurrect it and wear it.
I do want to go back and talk more about your parents' background, because based on the discussions I've had with Holocaust survivors over the years, you can almost divide them into two different camps. There are those who want to talk about it and want to impart the stories to their kids, and there are others who feel they can't burden their children with that much heaviness, and they never talk about it. Your parents were in the first camp. What impact did that have on you, having to listen to all of that?
Well, my parents, I think, really, because they both lost their entire families in the war, and they lived through the war together on the run the entire time. Thankfully, they weren't in concentration camps, but hiding in bunkers, underground cellars, attics, and barns, and just depending on the kindness of strangers, really. And they were very tenacious, and obviously they were very fearless. That was my dad's motto, don't be afraid and never give up. And I think by the end of the war, they realized that was the way to live a life, that you had to be fearless and you had to be tenacious, and they were hell-bent on teaching that to their kids. So they told us a lot of war stories, and maybe also not so much just to teach us about, how dark a place the world can be, but because it was very therapeutic for them to talk about it. They didn't have a lot of people to talk to. They, their families had all been decimated. I mean, it was just like my sister and I. So as two young girls, we would sit there listening to these war stories every night after dinner. I mean, I remember as a 5-year-old hiding under the bed because I didn't want to hear any more war stories. But now, I thank them for telling me those war stories and being that open about it, because I think it's those tales of toughness and tenacity that really help make me who I am. And my mom was also adamant about speaking to high school groups. She would go out there a lot, and it was very painful for her to talk about that, but she knew she had to keep those stories alive.
Okay, I'm going to take you to your teenage years here, and I'm going to show you a picture. And I want you to tell me, at a Ronnie Hawkins concert in 1969, who is this girl in the yellow top, and what is she doing on stage?
Well, darling. And it wasn't merely a Ronnie Hawkins concert. This was they called it the first Toronto Pop Festival at Varsity Stadium in 1969 in the summer. And there were 60,000 people there. And I got a ticket to go with my girlfriend, Esther. And I decided that, this would be a good place to flaunt my stuff. I don't know. I always wanted to be famous. Can I tell you?
You don't say.
I mean, I just did. I don't know. Ever since I was a little kid, I grew up with TV. I wanted to, be like Lucille Ball or, Captain Kangaroo or somebody. That's all I ever wanted. So I always thought I could get discovered, and so I actually had already started working professionally as an actress the year before when I was 16. But here I was 17, going to my first pop festival, and I wore this little yellow bikini top that had little black pom-poms on it. And I actually had a big yellow shirt that I wore over it. But when I got to my little spot on the ground, because we sat right up near the stage, and Ronnie Hawkins came on stage and started singing Hey Bo Diddley, I just got up and I started boogieing my brains out, because it was just a feel-good thing. And all of a sudden, Ronnie saw me and he points over to me, it's like, hey, you, come on up here. And I'm thinking, you talking to me? And my girlfriend Esther is going, yes, he's talking to you, go, go. And she's like pushing me to go. And before I knew it, these cops were helping me up on stage. They put me up on stage. I whipped off my yellow shirt because I thought, I've got a great little bikini top under here and I'm gonna shake those pom-poms. And I started dancing my butt off. And it was just, my brush with greatness. It was a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
New music and fashion television were really groundbreaking shows when they came out and lasted for a long time. What role did you play in the development, in the producing, in the directing, in the whole 9 yards of those shows?
Well, I had the incredible privilege of just being me and taking the ball and running with it, and under the leadership of the brilliant Moses Neimer, who was a total visionary, truly a genius, ahead of his time, and taught us all of those that worked at City TV, so much about the potential of this incredible medium, television. For me, I got to be myself, which I thought was pretty cool. I got to play in a sandbox that no other kids had really had a chance to play in before in that way. So, we were just flying by the seat of our pants, but, making it up as we went along. And, again, I was fearless and I was tenacious and all those things that my parents taught me to be. And I also had all this training in acting, in improvisation. I was even a trained mime artist, so I was aware of communicating in a theatrical kind of way that I think, suited the medium. Sometimes maybe not so much. I had to maybe play it down a little bit, but I could have fun with it. I mean, there was an irreverence to the way we did stuff that I think was quite welcome. And I never pretended to be anything that I wasn't. I was a stranger in a strange land. I was always in that world, but I wasn't of that world and didn't pretend to be. So to be able to take viewers by the hand every week and show them what that scene was really like, behind the velvet ropes, or like blow away some of the smoke and mirrors, both in music and in fashion, was really a great joy.
You're going to interview Paul McCartney, and you got to figure out, what am I going to wear to an interview with Paul McCartney? How did you figure it out?
Well, I thought, okay, Paul to me was my first love. I mean, I grew up with a poster of him over my bedroom wall. Like, I went to see the Beatles in 1963 because I was 13
At the
years
Gardens.
old. The second time they came, yeah.
Okay.
And I was just a total Beatle maniac. So when the opportunity to interview Paul McCartney came along, wow. It was just after he had done a film called Give My Regards to Broad Street, which wasn't really meeting with critical acclaim. But he was giving these junket interviews for the movie studio at the Plaza Hotel, great place to go to meet a Beatle. And I thought, what am I going to wear? And I really had this romantic vision of Paul was just such a grounded guy. So I thought, I'm going to wear this plaid flannel roots shirt so I could sort of look like the girl next door. And I'll team up with these, trendy, these big voluminous parachute pants, and I had these edgy metal earrings on. But I thought there was something comforting about this plaid flannel roots shirt, which was, ultimately Canadian too, of course. And I walked into the interview, and voila, there was Paul looking like, oh, so gorgeous. And he was wearing a plaid shirt, double plaid, because he also had a plaid blazer over the plaid shirt. And it was like, this is kismet. We're talking the same sartorial language here.
How did you end up interviewing Andy Summers of the Police in a bathtub?
Well, initially, when I first interviewed Andy Summers of the Police, it was in the very early 80s when the Police, first came out. And he was a very kind of naughty, very funny guy. And I had the opportunity to go to his hotel room and interview him with my new music cameraman. And he suggested that, let's do something really different here. Why don't I get into the bathtub and you could interview me in the bathtub? And I went, ooh, oh, okay. So I sat on the side of the tub as Andy was in the tub, but he had a little bottle of bubble bath, and he had put it in the bathtub, trying to hide his privates. He was wearing a T-shirt on top, nothing on the bottom. And but partway through the interview, the bubbles started to dissipate. And you could kind of see his junk, and it was like, "Ugh, get me out of here." But we did the interview. It made for great television, and that was that. So fast forward like 20 odd years later, and I'm at that point hosting fashion television.
And you're how old at this point?
I was like in my mid-50s.
Okay.
Mother of two. And here I am covering lots of photographers as well, as we did on fashion television. So Andy came out with this book, a photography book, because he was an avid photographer, of great backstage shots. And I thought, wow, we should have him on fashion television. It'd be great to meet up with him again after all these years. He said, but this time, Andy wants to get into the bathtub with her as well. Like, she's got to, like, what? So I'm like, whoa. I mean, on one hand, it's like, this is going to make for great television. My producers would love it. This is so great. But how am I ever going to do this? And at my age, am I going to get into any kind of a bathing suit and get into a bathtub with a rock star? And my mother, of course, was like, don't do it. Are you crazy? Who does such a thing? But I went to the shoot with a giant bottle of Mr. Bubble, because I knew, if we were going to get into a tub, we had to have lots of bubbles. It was just the best interview. He was going on about the meaning of art and life, and we had ordered Cosmos from room service, and Andy lit up a big fat joint, and this before it was legal. And he's like, takes a big toke, and he's, sipping his Cosmo, and he throws his hair back, and his hair gets on fire. The little votive just ignited his hair. And I was like, screamed. It's like I dropped the microphone.
Oh, for sake, did we get that on?
Yeah. Thank God we weren't electrocuted. And that was the story. And then we just resumed after that.
That's the positive side of an interaction with a rock star. Mm-hmm. There's another story where the interaction wasn't so positive. Iggy Pop. You really went after him hard and gave him HE double hockey sticks. What happened there?
Well, I mean, I went after him hard? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, he started to get very obnoxious with you.
Obnoxious.
And you told him to basically...
Yeah, I just wrapped it, I think, in a very cool, calm, and collected way. I wasn't going to stand for that crap anymore. A few months before this interview opportunity with Iggy Pop cropped up, I was at a festival called Heat Wave with him, and he was really coming on to me, and he was being very, friendly to me, and we got along really well, and I knew that Iggy could be very difficult, so my producer was thrilled that I managed to get some great sound bites from him. And so then a few months roll by, and I'm at my parents' house. It was a Friday night, and I'm over there having a Friday night dinner, dressed very conservatively. I mean, that's the thing. I've always seen clothing as costume, I guess, in a way. So you always sort of want to dress according to the act that you're going to be appearing in. So at my parents' house, of course, I would, wore some very conservative. I remember the olive green suede pants and a little red cashmere sweater, and I mean, it was the 80s. I'd gone there in my big fox fur coat. Ugh, never would wear that now, but hey, it was the 80s. So I was, there having a very pleasant late night dinner with my parents. And I get a call from my producer, John Martin, the late, great genius John Martin, who always, was putting me up to things. Okay, we just got a call from Iggy Pop's people, and he will give you an interview if you go down to the Danforth Music Hall, where he's just wrapping up his show. I said, but John, I haven't seen the show. I feel awful just like parachuting in at the last minute to say, no, Iggy's going to give you the interview, and I know you'll get a good interview with him. Just go. So it's like, ugh. So I drive down. This is like probably after midnight by this point, and I get to the Danforth Music Hall. I go down to the basement where the dressing room is, and I walk in, and I was like the only female there, as was often the case back in the day. My cameraman met me there, and the whole room was just filled with guys who were knocking back, paper cups filled with Jack Daniels, like getting an Iggy, of course, sitting in the corner, holding court. They just come off the set, and so it was bad, I guess, the way I made my entrance with that big fox fur coat and dressed like, so chicly for my parents' dinner. And it seemed like he didn't really recognize me at all, but I said, "Hi, Iggy," and I just sat down and we started talking, and he said something about he was writing this book, and I stupidly, wrong choice of words, I said, "Oh, is this your first attempt at writing?" And that he went, "Attempt? Well, I've got more talent than you could ever imagine." And he just started becoming very abusive with me. I think he was probably posturing in front of like all these guys, like, who is this bourgeoisie chick? I'm going to show her place.
I'm honoring you.
You're honoring me?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And I was just so appalled. And I have never walked out of an interview in all my career. And I've been interviewing people since the mid 70s. And, to this day, never shut down an interview. But I thought, wow. And I just stood up. I said, "Okay, I'm out of here. Gee, Iggy, He went, "Oh, I'm sure you can do a good cut-up job with this. You'll be able to do something with it." And I just left. I was mortified because, of course, it made for great television to have the great Iggy Pop putting me down. And I had a lot of detractors back in those days too. A lot of people who just didn't give me much credibility. They just thought, who she doesn't probably deserve that job to be interviewing these rock stars anyway. And they were, all these guys, I'm sure, were rubbing their hands in glee that Iggy had put me down. And my producer, John, of course, was thrilled with the footage, and he put it on TV. And I had all these people like, Iggy Pop really put Jeannie in her place. And I was so embarrassed, and I just felt dreadful about it. And then the thing ended up on YouTube, and it sounded like thousands of views. But recently I went back to look at that interview and the way I, handled it. And I thought, damn, I'm pretty proud of myself. There I was just probably, early 30s at that point. And, I had the confidence to stand up to someone like that, and on camera and just say, "I'm out of here." So I'm really proud of myself. So in that way, it did end up being a great life lesson for sure. And an interview that in a crazy kind of way, I am proud of.
Linda Evangelista, the supermodel who wrote the foreword for your book, she said you were the first person to actually want to get the views of the models and not just the designers. Where do you think that came from?
Well, it was the age of the supermodel, and they were the leading ladies. The designers were like the directors, and these gals were their leading ladies. So of course we wanted to give them a chance to say something. And happily, back in those days, a lot of those gals really did have something to say. They were great personalities. They were encouraged to be great personalities, the era of the supermodel. It became a little bit different, as the years went by, and, models should maybe be seen and not heard, and people didn't really care about them the way they cared about them during those early years, because they didn't want them to overshadow the clothing, because in a way the supermodels became more interesting than the creations that were coming down the runway. And designers sort of didn't like that after a while. But I just always wanted to expose the humanity behind the artistry. And I did see many of these great models as performance artists. And I thought that, they were caught up in such a crazy kind of world. They've got to have something interesting to say. And they certainly did, so many of them. They were great.
Okay, let's talk about the scariest moment of your life. You got a cancer diagnosis. Did you know you were going to make it?
No, how can you possibly know you're going to make it?
Well, you kept asking the doctor over and over, right?
I know.
Am I going to make it?
And of course they say, "Oh yeah, you'll be okay." But then they're probably just saying that because how does anybody know if anybody's going to be okay at any time? No matter what, you just don't. And cancer is a funny thing because it manifests itself in different ways and to different extremes, and some people really manage to recover, and some medications really work for some people and they absolutely don't work for others, and everyone's case is totally different. That's one thing.
You had surgery? You had surgery and chemo and radiation.
Yeah, at first I had chemo to try and shrink the cancer. My doctor did explain that if I had chemo first, they could see whether the chemo was working. They could see whether the chemo was shrinking the tumor, and that would be a good thing. Whereas if I just had the whole tumor out and then they gave me chemo, well, they wouldn't really know what the chemo was doing. So I thought, okay, I'll be tough and opt for that. Of course, I asked my brilliant doctor at Princess Margaret Cancer Center, Dr. Aitana Mir, I said, well, what would you tell your mother to do? Or what would you tell your sister to do? And he said, well, if it was me, yeah, maybe I'd go for the chemo first. So I said, okay. So I had 12 rounds of chemo that summer, every week. That was like 3 months. And I went through that whole summer going down some rabbit holes every once in a while because I thought, I've got this thing inside me and, I can't wait to get it out. I can't wait for the surgery. But as I went for my regular checkups, they found that the tumor was shrinking. It was like a 3-centimeter tumor, which is pretty sizable, but it was shrinking. By the time I had my surgery in the fall, the tumor had practically been eradicated, which was great. There was hardly like anything left of it. So that was really good. But it was scary. It was the most extraordinary year of my life. It made me a bigger, better, braver, wiser person for sure, no question. And I didn't see it as a test. Some people like, oh, it's the universe testing me to see if I can make it through this. I thought, no, this is my chance to prove to myself that I'm all those things that I always said I was, that I am fearless and that I am tenacious. And I am going to get through this. And I made the very conscious decision that I was going to live in the light and leave fear on the table because I just love my life so much. Love it still, loved it, back then as the stories prove. But I just figured I love my life so much, I don't want to let fear rob me of, even if I only had, like, God forbid, 6 months to live, I want to live in the light.
There is a picture of you in the book getting treatment, and you've got the biggest smile on your face like you're about to go off to Disneyland or something like that. Now, you could have chosen any number of different pictures, but you went for that one.
Yeah.
How come?
Well, because I want to promote positivity.
But you're getting treated for cancer at that moment.
Yeah, okay, but you can be positive about it. And how lucky that I could be treated for cancer. And how lucky that my cancer was found early. So it was not only treatable, but curable. How lucky that I have a place, like Princess Margaret and these doctors, and nurses and technicians and everyone that works in that building are like bona fide angels. How lucky that I live, in Canada, in a place where you can get that kind of treatment. So yeah, there was so much to be positive about. And how lucky that we're at this point in history where, the kind of breast cancer that I had, if I would have had that like 20 years ago, would not be good. It's not a great, not that any kind of breast cancer you have is great, but this one, like I'm triple positive, like HER2 positive is really, it's a tough one. So, but thanks to this brilliant drug called Herceptin that was invented a little over 20 years ago, it really helps keep things at bay.
How long are you cancer-free now?
Well, I was diagnosed in May of 2022, and I had my surgery in October of 2022, and I finished radiation in the spring of 2023, so a while. Not too long, but so far so good.
You're 72 now?
Yeah.
How's life?
Good. It's good. Yeah, it's good. It's great. It's great in terms of the work that I love so much, and I still get to do it. And I love it. Retirement is a dirty word to me. Like, do not talk to me about that. Don't ask me about that. I get when people say to me, oh, are you retired now? It's like, I am not. No, I love my work so much. Obviously it doesn't even feel like work. And it's very multifaceted, and it's there's just so much variety in the stuff that I do. And I'm working on this big museum show that I'm co-curating that will open in 2026. that's all about my career at Calgary's Glenbow Museum called Obsession, The Unscripted Life of Jeannie Becker. I mean, on one hand, I feel like, am I some kind of dinosaur? They're putting me in a museum. But on the other hand, how wonderful to have reached that point where I can really share so much of what's happened to me in this magical, magical life of mine, and try to encourage the next generation to dream and dream big and believe in their dreams, and don't be afraid and never give up, just like my parents taught me.
Jeannie, you're blessed. Thanks a lot for this.
Oh, thank you. I'm blessed that I had you here asking me these questions. You're a brilliant interviewer.
We're cutting that out.
Thank you so much.